Imagine this. You've just been told you have 2 years left to live. You sit in your modest home, surrounded by quiet clutter and suffocating stillness. The wallpaper is dated, the carpet worn, the silence louder than any scream. Your hands, once steady from years of chemistry, now tremble with panic. You don't scream. You don't cry. You don't even tell your family, not right away. Instead, something darker stirs inside you. Not desperation, not grief, but a strange electric curiosity. What if death wasn't the end, but a kind of permission? You're Walter White, a man the world forgot. A brilliant mind shelved into a high school classroom, a genius trapped in khakis and mildness. The world has always told you to play it safe, play it quiet, stay small. Now you're dying, but suddenly, finally, you're starting to feel alive. Here's the paradox that shatters everything. Walter White didn't become evil because he was dying. He became evil because for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to live. What would happen if the version of you who followed all the rules suddenly decided to break every single one? We're taught that morality is stable, that good people remain good, that evil announces itself with red flags and warnings. But Walter White wasn't a villain at first. He was a teacher, a father, a man who swallowed his pride to work at a car wash. And yet inside that quiet compliance, something venomous was fermenting, not chaos, not madness, resentment. He felt robbed, unseen, brilliant, but overlooked. And the moment he got a reason to stop pretending to let go of the mask, his descent didn't feel like destruction. It felt like freedom. This is the terrifying question Breaking Bad forces you to ask. What if the monster you fear isn't some stranger in the dark, but the version of you that's been quietly waiting for permission to come out? Walter White didn't turn into Heisenberg overnight. It was slow, seductive, justified. Every step of the way, he told himself, I'm doing this for my family. But was he? Or was that the lie he needed to keep going? You've probably felt it too. Those moments when you feel underestimated, cornered, powerless, the bitterness that creeps in, the thought that maybe you deserve more, that you're owed something for all your suffering, that if people could really see what you're capable of, they'd regret ever doubting you. But here's the real danger. What if you're right? What if you are capable of more? But the only way to access that power is to burn down the person you pretended to be. This isn't just about Walter White. This is about you, about all of us. The part of us that spent years sacrificing, conforming, staying in line, and then one day, we snap, not with violence, maybe, but with a shift, a decision, a quiet moment when we finally say, no more. And just like that, something wakes up. But here's the problem. Once you let that part of yourself out, can you ever put it back? Walter didn't start cooking meth because he loved chaos. He started because he wanted control, legacy, power. He wanted to be seen, but the path he chose required a transformation that couldn't be undone. Heisenberg wasn't a mask he wore. It was the face that had been hiding underneath all along. So ask yourself, what lies beneath your politeness? What lives behind your compromises? If you were given 2 years left to live, who would you really become? Would you finally start speaking your mind? Would you stop apologizing for your ambition? Would you burn down the life that kept you small, just to feel something real? Walter White didn't break bad. He woke up. And what he found was terrifying, not because it was foreign, but because it had always been there. Patient, waiting for the moment his excuses ran out and his true self stepped in. So now the question isn't whether Walter White is a monster. The question is, how far would you go if no one could stop you? Would you still recognize yourself? Or would you, like Walter, finally feel whole? What if the worst version of you felt like the most honest? There's a reason Walter White's transformation doesn't feel like a descent into madness, but a rise into power. He starts off as a victim, a man forgotten by time, outshined by his former colleagues, abandoned by the promise of his own potential. And yet when he begins to take control, when he chooses to break the law, lie to his wife, poison a child, watch someone choke to death without blinking, there's something disturbingly satisfying about it. Not just to him, to us. We watch episode after episode, not just with horror but with a strange, uncomfortable respect. Because beneath Walter's crimes lies a deeper tension that most people feel but never speak aloud. The fear that living a good life might leave you powerless, that playing by the rules might make you invisible, that goodness in a world that worships dominance is just weakness with a halo. Carl Jung once said, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow," and Walter White, the mild-mannered chemistry teacher, casts a long shadow. He spent decades denying it, numbing it, starving it, But the human psyche isn't built to suppress forever. Jung believed the parts of ourselves we disown don't disappear. They wait, in the unconscious, in the background. And when we lose control, when we're pushed, humiliated, betrayed, that darkness doesn't gently knock on the door. It kicks it down. Walter wasn't just becoming Heisenberg, he was integrating the parts of himself he spent his whole life hiding. His rage, his pride, his craving for recognition. The truth is, he didn't want peace, he wanted power. But power requires a price, and that's where the roots of dark psychology begin, in the lie of self-denial. Society teaches us that repression equals virtue. Don't be too loud. Don't want too much. Don't let your ambition scare people. Don't let your anger show. Be polite. Be patient. Be agreeable. But inside, something is screaming. Nietzsche warned about this in Beyond Good and Evil. He argued that morality, as society defines it, often becomes a leash, used not to promote virtue but to domesticate strength. He wrote, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that, in the process, he does not become a monster." But he also knew the deeper danger, that in refusing to fight at all, you lose the part of yourself that could have changed your world. Walter lost his place in the world long before the cancer diagnosis. He'd already been neutered by shame, mediocrity, and the slow erosion of self-worth. The diagnosis didn't break him. It gave him permission to stop pretending. It gave him a moral bypass. And with that, Heisenberg wasn't born. He was unleashed. This is what most people don't understand about dark psychology. It doesn't start with a desire to hurt others. It starts with a desperate need to feel whole. Arthur Schopenhauer, the bleak German philosopher, believed that most human suffering comes not from pain itself, but from powerlessness. We suffer most, he said, when we feel like we have no control. When life drags us along like a puppet on a string, when our pain feels meaningless, and so we chase control wherever we can find it, in money, in monuments, in manipulation, in destruction. Not because we're evil, but because we're starved for agency. Walter White wasn't just building a drug empire, he was building proof that he mattered, that he could shape the world, instead of being crushed by it. But here's the problem. Once you've tasted that power, once you've felt the thrill of saying no more and watching people flinch, you don't want to let it go. It becomes addictive. Not the money, not the danger, the significance. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." And Walter, for the first time, was finally making something on his own terms. But Sartre also warned, when you realize you're free to shape your identity, you also realize you're responsible for everything. Every choice, every lie, every consequence. And this is where dark psychology turns inward. Because now, Walter isn't just hiding his actions from others, he's hiding them from himself. Rationalizing, justifying, gaslighting his own conscience. The human mind is brilliant at bending reality to protect ego. We don't want to believe we're the villain, so we rewrite the script. I did it for my family. I had no choice. They disrespected me. This self-deception is what psychologists call moral disengagement, a cognitive process where we detach our actions from their ethical implications. We justify harm because it protects our identity. And when that identity is fragile, when it's built on decades of suppressed worth, we'll destroy anything that threatens it, including the people we love. Walter's descent wasn't inevitable. It was chosen. But it was chosen one justification at a time, one necessary evil at a time, until eventually the man who once refused to swear in front of his students was orchestrating murders like a chess game. And that's the real horror. Not that evil exists, but that it can grow in the soil of our most relatable wounds: shame, pride, rejection, the ache of a life unlived. Walter White is not just a cautionary tale, he's a mirror, and the question he leaves behind is as simple as it is terrifying. What would it take to break you? Not in some Hollywood-style dramatic collapse, but slowly, silently, with a few compromises here, a little denial there, until the person you were dies, not with a scream but with a shrug. So, if you think this story isn't about you, think again. Because the most dangerous lies aren't the ones we tell others, they're the ones we tell ourselves, just to sleep at night. You don't feel the transformation when it first starts. It begins as something subtle, almost noble. A compromise you can explain, a corner you cut to get ahead, a rule you bend just this once. And when no lightning bolt strikes, When no one calls you out, you think, maybe this is what it takes. Maybe this is what winners do. That's how it crept up on Walter White, not with malice, but with logic. He didn't become evil with a single decision. He drifted, one rationalization at a time. But while Walter was gaining control on the outside, something else was quietly unraveling on the inside. That's the hidden cost of dark psychology. It doesn't just hurt the people around you, it eats you from within. Slowly, quietly, efficiently. And the worst part, you won't even notice it until it's too late. Cognitive dissonance is the first crack. It happens when your actions no longer match your identity. You think of yourself as a good person, a father, a provider, but you've started lying, threatening, killing. The mind doesn't like contradiction. So instead of changing your behavior, you rewrite the story. Walter didn't stop seeing himself as the hero. He just changed the definition of what a hero looks like. I am the danger, he says. Not out of pride, but as a way to keep the pieces of his shattered identity glued together. This is what moral psychologists call identity maintenance. We don't need to be good. We just need to feel like we're good. And the mind will do Olympic-level gymnastics to protect that illusion. You justify, you compartmentalize, you numb, and just like that, your empathy begins to die. Neurologically, this is real. The more we justify harm, the more desensitized our brain becomes. Regions like the amygdala associated with guilt, empathy, and fear begin to dull. You feel less, care less. And over time, not because you're heartless, but because you've taught your brain to survive discomfort by ignoring it. Walter didn't kill out of bloodlust, he killed out of convenience. But the more he did it, the easier it became. That's not fiction, that's neural adaptation. It's how ordinary people do terrible things without feeling like monsters. Now take this deeper. The real danger of becoming someone like Walter White isn't just what you do, it's what you lose. Piece by piece, you lose intimacy, vulnerability, trust. The things that make life feel like life. By season 5, Walter has built an empire. He has millions stashed away. He's outsmarted cops, killers, and cartels. And yet he's alone. His son hates him. His wife fears him. His partner is broken. His brother-in-law is dead. And for what? That's the question Jesse Pinkman screams at him. Then why are you still doing this? And Walter finally answers not with a lie, but with the truth that was always lurking underneath. Because I liked it. I was good at it. And I was alive. That's not just a confession. That's a diagnosis. Because here's the paradox no one wants to admit. When you suppress yourself for too long, the first taste of power doesn't feel evil, it feels like healing. It feels like finally breathing after years of suffocation. But that relief is a trap, because once you get addicted to that feeling of control, of domination, of being feared, you start to confuse it for self-worth. And once your self-worth depends on being powerful, you will do anything to stay powerful. Lie, hurt, betray, kill. Not because you're evil, because you're empty. That's the hidden problem dark psychology exploits, the void inside us that power pretends to fill. Modern society amplifies this. We're taught to be exceptional, to succeed at all costs, to grind, compete, win, but we're not taught how to process failure, or rejection, or insignificance. So we overcorrect. We build masks. We chase power. We look for validation in domination. And the more people applaud us, fear us, or envy us, the more we believe we're okay, even if we're rotting inside. Walter built Heisenberg like a monument to his pain, and we watched, spellbound, because a part of us understood. We've all wanted revenge on a world that didn't see us. We've all fantasized about what it'd feel like to stop apologizing, to walk into a room and have everyone shut up and listen, to finally be unignorable. But the price? You lose your humanity inch by inch, because the moment you start valuing power over connection, you start trading love for fear, respect for intimidation, fulfillment for conquest. And here's the final tragedy. You won't notice what you've lost until it's gone. You'll look around at the empire you built and realize it's a throne made of bones, and the person sitting on it, a stranger with your face. That's the final lesson Walter White teaches us. Not about evil, but about erosion. You don't wake up one day and decide to become a monster. You just stop saying no to the parts of yourself that already were. You feed them, justify them, protect them, and over time, they grow louder than the voice that used to tell you right from wrong. So the question isn't just, what are you capable of? It's, What are you already becoming, without even realizing it? And more importantly, is it too late to stop? There comes a moment, if you're lucky, when the mirror cracks, not from impact, but from realization. You look at the reflection, and for a brief, terrifying second, you don't recognize yourself. Not because you've grown, but because you've drifted. You've drifted so far from who you thought you were, and there's no clear map back. That's the crossroads Walter White never truly faced. But you can. Because here's the truth. Once you've stared into the abyss of your darker self, you don't get to pretend it doesn't exist, but you do get to choose what to do with it. Carl Jung believed that the key to psychological wholeness isn't suppressing the shadow, it's integrating it, facing it, learning from it, not to unleash it blindly, but to consciously channel it. You're not supposed to kill the parts of yourself that crave power, revenge, or significance. You're supposed to understand them. Ask, what are you trying to protect? What wound are you guarding? Because underneath every dark impulse is often a very human need. Control hides fear. Arrogance hides shame. Rage hides grief. But when those needs are denied long enough, they metastasize. They start to run the show. Not because you're weak, but because you never learned how to listen to them without being ruled by them. So how do you break free? You stop lying to yourself. The first rebellion isn't against the world, it's against the narrative you've told yourself to justify your pain. Walter White said he did it for his family, but in the end he admitted it, he did it for himself. That moment of clarity, that was his most human act. Not the murders, not the manipulation, the honesty, the rebellion against self-deception. And that's where your transformation begins. Start with this question: where have I abandoned my truth in exchange for safety? Did you let your brilliance shrink to fit someone else's comfort? Did you trade your voice for approval? Did you water yourself down so you wouldn't be seen as too much? If so, that's where the real darkness crept in. Not in your anger, but in your silence, in your slow erosion. But here's the paradox: reclaiming your true self requires accessing your shadow. You need the courage of your anger, the honesty of your envy, the clarity of your disappointment. Because only when you stop pretending to be a good person can you start being a real one. History shows us this again and again. The rebels who changed the world weren't saints. They were people who refused to be domesticated, who embraced their full selves, rage, shame, power, grace, and used that fire with intention. Think of Malcolm X, Frida Kahlo, James Baldwin, Joan of Arc, Nietzsche himself. None of them were nice, but all of them were honest. Fierce, awake, they took their wounds and turned them into weapons, not to harm, but to heal, by revealing, that's your invitation. To step out of Walter White's tragedy, and into your own awakening. You don't have to build an empire. You don't have to destroy anyone. You just have to stop hiding. Start with radical accountability. Ask yourself, what parts of me have I exiled, and what is the cost of that exile? Then go deeper. What would it mean to stop performing, to stop being the good employee, the patient partner, the always smiling friend, and start being the honest one? What would it mean to stop shrinking from conflict, and instead lean into it with clarity? To stop people-pleasing, and start setting boundaries that actually protect your soul? This isn't self-help fluff. This is war, internal, necessary. Because if you don't rebel against your false self, you'll spend your life slowly dying in the name of being liked. Walter never had that rebellion.
I just came too late.
By the time he saw the truth, the damage was done. His transformation wasn't growth, it was rot. But your rebellion can be rebirth. That means choosing discomfort over denial. It means saying, this is who I am in full shadow and all, and I refuse to weaponize it. But I will use it. Use your rage to draw boundaries. Use your pride to defend your worth. Use your fear to fuel preparation. Use your shame as a signal that something inside you needs healing, not punishment. The point isn't to become perfect. The point is to become integrated. Because once you do that, once you stop pretending, you become unbreakable. Not because you've killed your darkness, but because you've befriended it. You're no longer a slave to the parts of yourself you were too scared to face. And that's the final twist. The rebellion isn't about becoming someone else. It's about coming home to the self you buried to survive. A self who doesn't need to dominate or deceive. A self who doesn't have to build a meth empire to feel powerful. A A self who can say, I see my shadow, I hear it, but I am the one who chooses what it becomes. So if you're reading this, wondering if it's too late, it's not. But it might be if you keep pretending you're fine. Start the rebellion now, not with fire, but with truth. Imagine standing in the ruins of everything you built. You have the money, you won the war, you outplayed every rival, buried every obstacle. But there's no applause, no parade, just silence and the haunting echo of your own breath. This is where we find Walter White in the end, alone, exhausted, untouchable, yet unloved, feared, but no longer feared by anyone who matters. He became everything he once envied, powerful, respected, free. So why does it all feel so hollow? This is the ultimate truth, the one you avoid your whole life, until it's staring you in the face with dead eyes. You don't want power, you want to matter. That's the revelation most men never reach until it's too late. They think they're chasing dominance, wealth, victory. But peel back the layers, and what you're really chasing is significance. You want to feel seen, understood, valued. You want to know that who you are means something, that your pain wasn't pointless, that your life leaves a mark. Walter believed that empire would make him whole, that if he could just become someone, then all those years of humiliation would disappear. But empires built on ego don't satisfy. They just distract, until the distractions run out. And that's when the real horror sets in. You can win every external battle and still lose the only war that matters, the one for your soul. You're not here to become Heisenberg. You're here to redeem Walter. Because in the end, all his intelligence, all his strategy, all his bravado, they weren't evil. They were misdirected. He didn't need to destroy to feel alive. He just needed to stop lying to himself about what he really wanted. He didn't want to be feared. He wanted to be free. But he confused freedom with control. And that confusion is what poisoned everything. So let's strip it down to the core. What makes a life meaningful isn't what you conquer, it's what you connect to. The people who've seen you at your worst and stayed anyway. The work that lights something up in your chest. The truths you whisper to yourself at 3 a.m., even if no one else ever hears them. Walter traded all of that for a myth, a name, a brand, Heisenberg. But a name on a bag of blue meth doesn't love you back, and neither will the fear you inspire. But here's the most powerful part of this entire tragedy. It doesn't have to end like his story. You still have time to stop proving and start feeling, to stop performing and start connecting, to stop justifying and start healing. The self you buried, the one before the bitterness, before the compromises, before the mask, he's still in there. Not as weakness, but as your compass. And maybe that's what Walter White's story is really about. Not the descent into evil, but the longing for redemption that never came. He didn't need to become someone new. He needed to remember who he was before the world convinced him he wasn't enough. Before he got too proud to ask for help, too ashamed to show pain, too desperate to admit he was scared. That's where transformation begins. Not in becoming better, but in becoming honest. And it's not clean. It won't earn you applause. It might not even look impressive from the outside. But it's real. And realness. Realness is the one thing you can build a life on that won't collapse under pressure. So here's your final question. The one that splits the soul down the middle and doesn't let you sleep until you answer it. Who are you without your mask? Not the polished version. Not the overachiever. Not the rebel. Not the people pleaser. Just you. The one underneath. Are you proud of that person, or have you spent so long hiding that you don't even know them anymore? Because that person, that raw, wounded, brilliant, imperfect self, is the one who can still be saved. Not through empire, not through dominance, not through applause, but through presence, through love, through the courage to be fully seen. That's the part Walter couldn't face. And so he died not as a monster but as a man who confused power with purpose and paid the price. But you still have a choice. You can end the story here and repeat the same patterns, or you can stand up, right now, and decide. I will not betray myself to be powerful. I will not abandon connection for control. I will not die with my truth buried inside me. Because the most revolutionary act isn't rebellion, it's self-reclamation. And the most powerful version of you isn't the one who's feared. It's the one who is whole. So breathe deep, step forward, and write a story that ends not with regret, but with freedom.